Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is author David Kindopp. He is an author of articles for the Mazatlan Messenger, and he is also the author of a book called Mañana Doesn't Mean Tomorrow. David writes lots of great stuff. Today, it is the Coconut Telegraph. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for having me here again.
Thank you for being here. In this article that you wrote, it stripped naked, absolutely naked, some of the primary painful characteristics in human nature. It made us realize that the insecurities of most human beings are based by their comparisons of what somebody else is doing, real or imaginary. And when those things are exposed and they're real or imaginary, they can do some damage.
Oh, sure.
Yes, they can. And although some people get their egos built by them, a lot of people don't see it that way. I'm going to ask you to reiterate your article for the public with that message in mind.
Sure. Coconut Telegraph. And this piece came to mind after living in Mazatlan for a few years and personally being involved in the gringo community there. I'm not a person that likes, the spotlight or to be in the limelight at all. But living in Mazatlan, just being a gringo in Mazatlan, first of all, you start to know other people and other people know you. It's very much like living in a small town. The permanent population of gringos, North American people, let's say from United States or Canada, is they say about 4,500 people in a city of about 600,000 people total. But of course all the gringos pretty much gather in one strip close to the ocean, and then in the centro town itself that's been restored and renovated, which is close to the ocean. And the seasonal population of gringos is estimated to be about 12,000 people. So that's probably from November, to May or June. And what I observed were people who, as in any group, anytime you get more than 3 or 4 people together, there's going to be politics, right? And I think now, of course, all this is strictly my opinion, right? But I'm the one who writes it. Is that in a retirement scenario? Excuse me. In a retirement scenario, people seem to have more time to think about and dwell on aspects of life and their fellow community that they wouldn't if they were busy getting up at 6 o'clock and getting to work at 8 and getting home at 8 o'clock. And so my observation is there's a lot of free time to have social hours and happy hours and margaritas and wine clubs and the ladies' nights to get together and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of time to observe and to comment, on what your fellow expats, the fellows in your community are doing. And in that scenario, things come up like, some people have a proclivity to want to make themselves more important by making others less important. So for some people, as we know, it's easy for them. It's a common thing for some folks to demean others to make themselves feel better. And in the meantime, the Coconut Telegraph, if you will, that's at work, circulating this news, can really have an effect on other people, because a certain element of any group is going to believe what somebody says. Especially if the person who saying it or talking about it or is disseminating this news, this gossip, is somebody who has a history of being a good salesperson in their vocation. Let's say where they lived in California and they sold whatever they sold. They sold something for a living, so they're really good at that. They're good at convincing people. So they get this idea in their head about somebody, and they'll convince their group that that's true when it quite likely isn't. And whether it is or isn't true, who cares? I mean, the fact is we all have to live together, and in a place like Mexico, Mazatlan, it's a very small community, and everybody's in the same boat, so to speak. It's a small boat, and the most important thing to do is to appreciate that and not rock the boat, and all be pretty much rowing in the same direction, and not capsizing the boat. And so you hear all these things from these people. You hear about like who's been sleeping with whom, and whose husband is sexually dysfunctional one way or the other, and who's sleeping in separate bedrooms, and who thinks somebody's husband is a jerk, and it's like I don't want to know that stuff. I mean, that's just too much information. I don't want to go out and have margaritas and have this, these images planted in my mind, whether they're real or not, about other folks that are genuinely pretty much good folks. I mean, most people are pretty good people. I mean, there are a few exceptions, obviously. We all have come across those people in our lives. But it's so fascinating to me to see how that works in that kind of an environment, because you've got this amazing scenario where certain people always gravitate together, they make friends, and that's how it works in the world of human politics. And you'll get a certain group of people that will always be hanging out at a certain bar, at a certain day or a certain time, having their certain drinks, and they just eviscerate their fellow man. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, who got drunk and passed out in their car the night before in their garage, and like I said, I don't want to know that, and I don't think most people really, really want to know that. But I find it very fascinating that there's so much time involved in that case, like I said, that people have a chance to just dwell on that.
Dave, don't you think a lot of that comes from the fact that most of us who travel to Mexico, real or imaginary, think that it's a party town? Wherever we're going, it's a party town. We get that concept in our head even when we come from quiet, placid lives. We're going to Mexico, it's a party town. And don't you think it's possible that the people there keep that image up because that's their tourism, or is that my imagination?
Well, certainly people that visit for a week or two definitely go there with the attitude that it's going to be a 1 week party or whatever it is. Sure, and it is a beer drinking kind of beachaholic town for sure. But I'm talking about people who live there pretty much 24/7. I mean, even if you're only there for 6 months, that's living there, at least in that time of the year. For 6 months. I'm talking about permanent residents.
Wow.
But they're there because it's what it is. I mean, they chose to be there. And they chose to be there because they can go down and sit on a table, on a patio, on a beach, and linger over cocktails or cervezas or whatever. So, I mean, they're there for that reason. I mean, they're not in Aspen, or Sedona,
right.
or Guadalajara. They're Mazatlan, just like there are people in Costa Rica doing the same thing, or Ecuador or any other place. And I'm sure it's the same. I know I have a friend who used to live in Costa Rica, and it's the same thing. The gringos get together and they form these little enclaves wherever they go, which is natural.
Right.
But yeah, we're talking about people who live there. I mean, people who live there all the time. And, there's this one group, there was a group, I don't know if they still operate, and it's the ladies, certain ladies get together. It's about 15 ladies that kind of know each other, and they get together every Saturday for the wino, they call it the wino club. And they drink wine, basically, and they have fun, and they maybe meet at somebody's house or a condo, and they go in the pool, and they go swimming, and I would say 50% of the time, 25% of the people get pretty well pounded. And you don't know when they come home, what they're going to be about, whether they're going to be, depending on the personality, of course, they're going to be happy, they're going to be mad about something, they're going to be just the way it happens when you drink a lot, And in Mazatlan, certain people just drink a lot. That's what they do, which I've been accused of doing. But I mean, I don't drink any more in Mexico than I do here. Absolutely, I don't. I'm sure that's true.
So don't go to Aspen and not expect skiing. So know what you're expecting in Mazatlan.
Well, I mean, again, I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but the people that spread the rumors and the misinformation, basically irritate me.
Right.
And I've been, and maybe part of it is because I've been a subject to that. I've been pretty well vilified by the Coconut Telegraph because of just who I am, and sometimes what I write, but often not even what I write. It's just because I incurred the wrath of a particular individual, and they made it their mission, to tell everybody in town, what a bad boy I am.
Oh, but David, everyone who dares to speak their truth and to get honest gets attacked because it's unpopular.
Right.
The fact that you're a writer, you're going to get the wrath of somebody who isn't or who feels less than. And as you so adequately pointed out in your article, insecure people feel more secure when they can pull out the rug from someone else and make the other guy a little shorter.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm not saying that everybody who spreads a little rumor once in a while is totally insecure. I mean, we all have our lapses. I've had mine, of course you've never had any, but
yeah, right.
but yeah, and so again, I mean, so I don't have a bomb thrown through my window. I just want to reiterate that I'm not saying that everybody that might be a subject of this conversation is a schmuck.
Well, we're all human, and we all make mistakes. There's no such thing as a perfect human being because that's who we are.
Right.
And we know that. There are people that don't just talk about the downside, they elaborate the downside and make the downside so much more picturesque and dramatic than it ever was.
Right.
For example, in one of the examples from your article, the girl who was basically the victim of some guy's ego trip of having an affair with her that never happened.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, and that's an interesting concept, and I never thought about it until I wrote this piece about, usually it's just, people gossiping about other people, but in this case, this guy inserted himself into the, he spread a rumor about himself.
Right. But it was a male ego trip because he thought that being a man is being macho and sexual.
Right.
But we have a dual standard world here. He totally degraded the woman that actually had no part in it.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
Without any thought.
Yeah, well, with obviously some thought, but not, pretty much one way. Yeah.
Not thought for her.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Not thought for her.
Yeah, and so for me, it's about as much as anything, it's about the idea of, well, let's stop and think about this. So the next time we're tempted, one of us or I'm tempted to, offer my opinion about somebody, maybe I should just shut up and listen. I mean, it's fascinating. And this thing came about, and one of the things that reminded me of this, or that kind of correlated with this was, we talked about it earlier, was Jimmy Buffett's song that he wrote, years ago called Coconut Telegraph. And he talks about that, how, on the island, it's hump day on the island, and, all the news has been said, but, the plane's going to arrive on Friday, and, we're going to start over again with all this gossip and stuff, and who went with who, and, who did this and who did that, And it rang so true in terms of what I experienced in Mazatlan in Mexico. And hopefully one can distance themselves from that to the degree they want to, but it's usually very, very difficult to do that, to just not participate. Because you get to a certain point and people around you want to participate in that,
Well, it's a verbal dance, even though it's a street dance.
Right, yeah.
And street dances, of course, aren't always, don't have the finesse of ballroom dancing. And so what you're doing, basically, is having a conversation that has become a street dance.
Yeah, I never thought about it quite like that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, I felt like I had to say something. I had to make a note of that. I had to mention that. Now it's interesting because the piece we're talking about, where I really got more specific about, I mean, I'm not. Of course, I never mentioned any names, and I don't think I even mentioned gender to the degree that anybody could know who I'm talking about. But in the piece that I wrote for the Moz Messenger, I really watered it down. I mean, this is not what we're talking about here.
Right.
Because I expanded that piece to be more honest for this next book I'm writing, this collection of short stories.
Right.
And so I put in more truth, quote, more accuracy in it. And that's where I get to the point, I get down and I talk about how there's somebody who's an absolutely, totally insecure, alcoholic, dysfunctional person who can literally use their salesmanship to totally defile and eviscerate, a person who they really have come to in some ways dislike, or hate, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and it seems like in that environment that it's more easily true than not. That's what I get, because you get these people in there, they make this comment or they make another comment, and then all of a sudden it's like running for office. If you say something enough times, it becomes true in some people's minds. I mean, if you're running for president or the Congress, I mean, hey, some politicians have that absolute attitude. That's their methodology. Say it enough times and it becomes true. And I think that's what a lot of these folks do. Say it enough times to enough people and with enough conviction, and it becomes true. For some people it does. Yeah. And I think I mentioned in this piece, it's like running for office. Isn't that like running for office? Or isn't that like, putting bad information in Wikipedia? When I first became exposed to Mazatlan 25 years ago, the Coconut Telegraph was kind of like the Coconut Telegraph. I mean, there was no internet, there were no cell phones. And so if you went out and did something stupid, chances are the only way anybody would really be gossiping about it is if you bumped into some other people that knew about it, next week or the next day at one of a few establishments. And so and the community was more connected then. It was really like living in a foreign country. And because there was not that strong, connection with like the internet, there was a more sense of respect for each other. We're all here together. We all have to appreciate it. We all need to stick together. And now there are a lot more gringos there, and it's a lot more like the United States. It's living in Mazatlan is a whole lot like living in San Diego near the beach. I mean, you go to San Diego and go to a restaurant, and chances are your server is going to speak Spanish. And is going to be Mexican or Hispanic or whatever. So there's a comfort zone that's created there, and then of course the telecommunications are incredible. I mean, I think I mentioned, if you go out and you get drunk and you stumble home and make a fool out of yourself, everybody's going to know about it before you even get home. Because it's going to be tweeted and Twittered and Facebooked, and God only knows what, and there you are. In fact, there's a guy who started this internet, group, whatever, call it a communications group. I don't want to make it specifically, but well, who cares? It's called Mazatlan Fire and Brimstone, and it's made specifically to just vent about anything to do with Mazatlan.
Oh.
And so people go on there and they go crazy with venting, what they want to be pissed off about, And I thought to myself, well, why wouldn't maybe somebody ought to create a group that talks about where do we post all the good stuff about Mazatlan, And so people go on there and they vent, and they go ballistic. And of course, I went through a period where I watched that happen about a year ago, and people get on there and they get on the bandwagon and they get on a particular case of somebody's, and it just snowballs, and everybody piles on and piles on and piles on. And of course, meanwhile, they're breaking all of these rules for this website, about what they can and can't say about people.
Right.
And it's just it takes on a life of its own, and it's absolutely incredible to watch that happen.
I think one of the most shocking things would be to return home for several months or a year, go back to Mazatlan, and find out all of the misadventures you had had that you didn't even know about.
Right. Yeah. Well, that could happen. Oh, absolutely. And of course, meanwhile, for me, I don't really like the limelight, but I had the fortunate or unfortunate, scenario where I wrote this book, right? Mañana doesn't mean tomorrow, and it's about me, and it's about what happened in Mexico and in Mazatlan, and I candidly admit my little picadillos and missteps and misadventures, and so everybody that wants to gossip about anything, not so much anymore, it's kind of old news, but anybody who wants to gossip can always talk about me, oh man, I read this, and if he did that, then he must be just really whatever, and all this crazy stuff. Yeah, and so, I wrote candidly about me, but I also wrote candidly about others, and so in doing that, then I'm the subject of the Coconut Telegraph, but I admit, I opened myself up for that, but I didn't bargain to be completely judged, by certain things that I wrote, that kind of thing. But hey, that's my cross to bear. I can't say you shouldn't talk about me, in that regard. But in other, in other concepts and context, I think it can go too far, And it's not, of course, just about me. I've heard it about other people. And it's disconcerting. It's very disconcerting. And again, like I said, maybe, and I think it's long since been read in the Mazatlan Messenger, my watered down version of this, and I don't even think anybody probably paid any attention, like, oh, maybe it's just David's ramblings, who cares? Now, if in fact this story gets read in the new collection of short stories by some folks in Mazatlan, they'll be pissed off, probably, because they'll recognize themselves in it.
But you see, even though they recognize their behavior, you didn't nail it down to their identity.
Oh, no. I made that mistake once. I'll never do that again.
No. If we can keep it in concepts of human behavior,
oh, sure. Yeah.
Then it's a reality we all should look at.
Right.
Everyone.
So I guess basically my thoughts about that would be just as, to encapsulate what we've talked about, is that, again, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. And I think we could just keep that in mind. Instead of sitting around, during cocktail hour and having your inhibitions further lubricated so that you can then, blurt out what you think you know about somebody or what somebody told you they know about somebody, forget it. Why not? In fact, why not go the opposite direction, and why not just, when somebody says, did you know that so-and-so did this, why not say, yeah, maybe, but boy, I really like the way they handled such and such. Or, I think they're pretty damn dapper, or whatever. Anything, just to change the mood of the conversation, and I think when you can change the mentality of the conversation, everybody benefits, the energy becomes higher and it vibrates faster. And it just makes for a whole better human encounter.
That is a beautiful summation, David, because the reality is most people that make mistakes do it in the beginning because of lack of self-confidence. So even if they're wrong, if we go and undermine them and make that self-confidence worse, they're not very apt to heal.
It can have a really radical effect on some people.
Yes, it can. And being benevolent is always better, because the attitude that you have about people, they internalize it.
Some do.
Yeah, a lot of people internalize it. You'd be surprised how many people, a greater number, internalize it than not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this statistic means that we ought to have nicer attitudes and find something nice to say about people in their presence, to them and to others, to help them start realizing that they themselves are not living up to the better part of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because
right.
We all have positive, we all have negative. There's no such thing as anybody completely positive and completely
right.
negative.
Oh, right.
We're all, whole. We have everything.
We all have our shadow side.
That's right. So if we can learn to recognize within ourselves and others the better qualities of each other, we're on a better place to building the consciousness up for better lives all the way around.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I loved about your article, is because you so poignantly pointed out what is a very common human frailty, And I don't think there's a life that it hasn't touched in some way in this particular article.
Well, that's interesting. I appreciate that. And like I said, and I think what you've mentioned is that hopefully it makes people think. Hopefully it makes people think. Yeah.
That would be nice.
And be more kind, you know. Be more kind. Be kind now, you know.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. So one interesting example of this, not where anybody was trying to malign anybody in particular, anyone in particular, was there was this thread going on a while back about a fella who had lived in Mazatlan a long time, and he was having health problems, you know. And I think that I guess he'd had a wild and crazy life. He'd been in Mazatlan a long time. He'd had a business. He was a gringo, and people had talked about how he had this really great life, and everybody really loved him. He was vivacious, whatever, you know, and a lot of energy. And he always had a señorita or two on his arm and all this kind of stuff. But evidently he drank a lot, right? And people might know who this is, but he has passed on, so it's not like I'm saying anything new here. And in this conversation thread, when this first came up, it was so and so is in so and so's passed away, you know. And this is why, and this is how. And then somebody else chimed in. It was like, no, he's in the hospital and he's this and that. And then somebody else chimed in and said, no, he's this and he needs to we need to put him in the hospital, and we need somebody to help him with his drugs. And then with somebody out with his medicine. And then the next person chimed in, no, he's in the hospital, but they're letting him die because he can't afford the care, and they're not giving him his medicine. And then somebody else chimed in, no, they're giving him his medicine. I'm a friend, I know somebody who's a nurse who's a friend of the doctor. And it went on and on and on, and it was all over the place, you know. And so there was no way to know at all what was the truth. But it was all these people that had their version of the truth. Of course, which is, you know, what we're talking about. Because we have all these, let's say somebody's talking about somebody. Let's say it's me, you know. Hey, did you hear that dumb David wrote this book, and he did this and he did this, and so you have 5 people talking about it, and you have 5 people with their version of the truth, right? And none of those versions is correct, as it turns out. And it was just so funny when I watched that happen. I watched it unfold, and it was like, well, why even? I mean, it's comical. It really is comical, because you have all these people chiming in with what they believe is the truth. And none of it's correct, you know, or a combination of it is correct, you know, and so, well, why bother, you know, why bother? But everybody's so anxious to say what they think they know, you know. Fascinating.
One of the cute parts of this article that I enjoyed is that you say, here you are writing a book, you're writing articles, you're appearing on television, and you want a life of anonymity.
I know.
I thought that was really cute.
Yeah.
I started laughing, and I thought, isn't that the human paradox?
Yeah. Right.
It is the human paradox.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm becoming more comfortable with being disagreed with.
Well, we enjoy you. We enjoy your writing very much. It's fun. It's funny. It's reflective.